as you know, and as I know how much we love UX, how important it is and how dramatic an impact it can have, how a proper UX can really make the difference between a success and a failure. Salesforce does offer a UI that they call Lightning UI. And it's not bad, but there is a lot of variations. And just like building a website or a web application, you have a lot of choices. You are limited on what you can and can't do. It's not a custom application that you can build from scratch to design in any way you want. But there are components to it, dragging and dropping. There are different layout patterns, 2 columns, 1 column, 1/3, 2/3 type of columns. And these choices do make a difference.
Welcome to the FutureMoose Podcast, the #1 podcast for simplifying and growing your business with better design. I'm Adrian Sule, and if this is your first time listening, welcome. So whether you're a tech company founder or product professional and looking to level up your game by scaling and optimizing your products and services faster with world-class design tips and secrets, this podcast is for you. I'm super excited to introduce you today to my guest on the show. His name is Alexander Lapa. We've worked on a similar project in the past with the same client. Alex runs an independent consulting service business called Dry Ad Consulting. And at the core, he's one of Canada's top solution architects and an expert in Salesforce. And most of all, he's got a keen eye for design as well. And did I mention he's certified in user experience? He's a key player in solving complex technical problems with a futuristic approach on things, and also an avid traveler. Spent 2 years traveling around the world, and he's also the inspiration for me, what got me and my family to start traveling more. Alex, thank you for being my first guest on the podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, give us an update of those who don't know you, and how your business Dry Ad Consulting works, and how it helps tech founders or larger companies solve complex problems.
Well, first of all, Adrian, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. You asked me like 5 questions in a row, so I'll have to maybe tackle the first couple, and then you'll have to remind me what the other ones were.
Sounds like a plan.
So yeah, I've been doing software consulting for about 17 years now, 18 years now. I lose track of the days as it all blends together. But I fell into CRM and Salesforce in the last few years that I really, really enjoy. I find it's an incredible product, and it has a lot of great benefits to the people I work with. So now you need to remind me on some of these questions you've asked me.
Maybe you can describe me the process of how you identify problems for your client projects, and how do you identify what needs solving? So just help me understand the uniqueness maybe of your offering.
Right. So basically I come in as a consultant or with an agency, depending on what the use case is, to overhaul an existing legacy system. So sometimes a company might have some old processes or old systems that used to work for them in the past, but now is just slowing them down. And the idea is they've heard of or have already bought Salesforce, and now we're looking for an implementer, because Salesforce itself only sells the product, and they work with partners like myself to implement it for customers' specific needs. Salesforce is a customizable product. You buy it, you can use it pretty much out of the shelf as a vanilla version, but really it's meant to be customized for your particular business needs. So one of the first things that I do is I come on board, I figure out what are the project goals, because there are different versions of Salesforce or different clouds of Salesforce. Depending which one you bought, you might want to expand in that different area. And then I assess, what is the situation? Where do you want to go? Where are you currently? And then we figure out a way to get you from A to B.
And what's the most popular project types that clients come for you or make requests for?
I tend to stay on the small side, small and medium-sized businesses. Enterprise level usually requires a much larger team. And I have worked with those in the past, but being more of a soloist, I prefer the smaller ones where I can feel I'm making a really dramatic impact to my clients.
Very neat. Can you talk to me about your process of how you contribute to these projects?
So in terms of process, one of the first 2 things that I do first we establish the business objectives, what we're trying to achieve in this project. And then as I start going, and there's a whole discovery phase first. So we have a long conversation about what we're trying to achieve, what is the end goal, what does the end state look like, what does success look like. We do sometimes a business process review, again, part of the discovery to figure out what exactly does the client want and how do we get there? What is the current process and kind of a process flow chart. And we might even map out a to-be flow chart or a target chart. I also make sure I understand the full architecture, so how Salesforce is connected to any other system. And once I have that holistic picture, then we can start moving to the implementation phase where I actually work on it and build it out.
Got it. And I assume with this process, you have to make decisions in terms of tooling and, I don't know, methodologies you're going to use. Can you describe or give some examples of integrations you're using or methodologies that are, and also why some are more important than another for your end customer?
Right. So it really depends on the customer's needs at this point and what they're currently using. Sometimes they want to integrate Salesforce to their legacy ERP systems. Sometimes they have certain mass mailers they want to integrate with, or sometimes they're ready to throw everything out and start fresh from a Salesforce perspective. So it's really on a case-by-case situation. And then what was part two of that? Great, you're asking great questions, but I'm not remembering them all.
Got it. No, I guess it's about tooling. This one was more about tooling.
Right. So Salesforce itself comes with a whole bunch of features and functionality, but it doesn't do everything. So there are portions of what you might want to do that Salesforce doesn't cover. I mentioned one of them is a mass mailer. It can handle certain mailings within Salesforce, but it's more meant for a one-off type of situation. If you're doing some kind of marketing campaign, an email campaign, then it's much better to add a plugin to it or to use other portions of Salesforce or tools that Salesforce has purchased and integrated into their cloud in order to be able to do what you're looking for. So again, case-by-case situation, depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Are there any, I'm thinking maybe with some projects, they already have either legacy setups and legacy tools, or I don't know, even legacy people in the company who have been there for years and years. How do you overcome some of those challenges where you have to, with retention to change and things like that? Resistance, sorry, not retention.
Actually, change management is a big part of what I do because I'm coming in and I'm transforming the business from whatever they did in the old way to what we're going to use in Salesforce. There is a lot of change management that's required. So getting the buy-in from executives, having a more top-down approach is a very important part, because if it's done any other way, then it has a chance of failing. The project has a chance of failing. Also, working with a particular champion, someone who knows the current system in and out, helps tremendously. And then it's really about building out the new system piece by piece. Salesforce has this approach, this methodology called crawl, walk, run, where the first version of Salesforce, your first implementation of it, should not be with all the bells and whistles that you can think of. It should be something very basic, very simple. It might not be feature parity for what you have currently, but the idea is that you're now growing and building on that as time goes on, because that will then just reduce the amount of change that's needed to get people to adopt and adapt to the new situation, the new process, and new platform.
Right. And have you encountered any situations where you had to educate the client because some of the technologies or the solutions you're recommending are, maybe modern and they haven't heard of them, or like how? Is that something you do? You also educate your clients in areas where they lack knowledge of, in order to get your implementation fully implemented and offer them success, basically?
Most of the time, people know what they want. They just don't know how to get there. And so I'm the one providing the roadmap, so to speak. And I can make suggestions based on what they're trying to achieve, whether we go with option A or option B. But most of the time they know how to get there, or they need a bit of nudging, maybe a soundboard, someone to help discuss what their issues are, and together we work out the solution.
Okay. So this also involves, I would assume, becoming a sidekick to some of their team members, maybe who are also, um, experts in certain technologies, but you're coming in as an outsider and you have to kind of work side by side with them while, I assume, leading the engagement. How does that work?
I try to take a partner approach to things. So I really try asking a lot of questions to understand their business. And I try to put myself as best as I can in their shoes to make sure I can see their success and I want their success. I don't see myself as just a monkey to be able to do work. I actually want to be vested, have a vested interest in their success. And definitely working with their champions, like I mentioned, working with people who are inspired and want to see this kind of change is a big importance. And be able to just have that trusted relationship so that I know and they know if I say something and recommend something that it's probably in their best interest.
Right. Yeah. I guess, yeah, there's that mutual respect that needs to be set up front when you dive into the engagement. I wanted to ask if you can think of some, and maybe it can be high level, but does Salesforce apply to smaller companies or early stage companies? Is that something they can leverage? I'll give you an idea. Let's say there's a startup who is building a new fintech product or an insure tech product, like insurance tech, or health tech, whatever, all the prefix, you name it, plus tech type of new trendy companies. So if they're early stage, would you recommend them taking a Salesforce approach for speeding up their process and shipping MVPs faster, or is this something that works better for more like mature companies?
That's a great question. Salesforce does have different versions, and some are designed for smaller businesses, but I tend to find the ROI is not quite there. You want to be at a certain level, and I can't even tell you exactly what that would be, but definitely over $1 million revenue per year. Less than that, and you'll either have to make certain sacrifices or really won't be able to benefit from the full package and suite that Salesforce has to offer. There are some other CRMs that you might want to consider and different add-ons you can do to those that would probably fit that kind of niche. But anytime you're past $1 million and you find your current process is inefficient, you stop using Excel or your Outlook isn't working well, or you might have different other systems like HubSpot or whatnot, which might work really well when you're a smaller business. But when you get to a certain size, you're going to want the best. And Salesforce is the #1 CRM at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I would assume for maybe startups who still call themselves startups, but they're past Series A, they're Series B or C, they have an annual recurring revenue of, like you said, over 1 million. And maybe they're consolidating tools or scaling in a scaling phase or high growth phase, then that's the right time to at least consider looking into discussing with someone like yourself, like an expert in software architecture.
Yep, you got it.
Solutions architecture, sorry. And what would you say are some of the, I don't know if I should call them, like, I'm not vexed enough in the Salesforce area, but if there's any examples from past clients that you can give, like for this particular client, don't have to name them, I've done this and that, and like describe some pains or problems Salesforce solved for them through your expertise, of course. It could be one example or two.
The biggest problem usually is adoption. It's I can build them the most fantastic solution that they can imagine, but I can't get them to use it. They have to be involved from the beginning and throughout the entire process, so that when I do that handoff, when I have led them to the water, so to speak, they actually drink from it. And part of that, of course, is building the interest, building excitement, making sure that training is working well, making sure that their testing is working well, that things are being delivered during the project phase. So that to me is probably the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons why Salesforce projects fail. The technical elements, there's always going to be a solution. There's always a way to make things work. And in some cases, for the very reason that, like I said earlier, that crawl, walk, run approach, usually we consider an MVP, a minimum viable product. What is the minimum value that we need to deliver in a first phase that they can start using it, leveraging it, and then build on that? So I've never seen a situation where we were not able to achieve an MVP and a successful MVP. It's more the adoption process and all the softer portions of the project that need the most attention.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And if I'm gonna look at it from a specific example of solving a problem pain point, like a customer came to you to say, I don't know, they're a dealership, just making this up, but they're a dealership and their current system works with XYZ tools, and they think Salesforce can improve things. Or I don't know, an example of an actual business, again, no naming, but an actual business where you've taken them from nothing or from whatever solution was not working for them before to something that, move the business needle on by applying whichever solutions you offer them.
Yeah, I can think of two projects that I worked on. One of them, both in the transportation industry. One of them is more of a transport and fintech, to use your terminology, financial technology. These guys are basically delivering vehicles to you. So like an Uber, you can order a vehicle, like purchase a vehicle and have it delivered to you. And this is a really cool, advanced or cutting edge, let's say, team that I really enjoy working with. And for now, they just do a lot of stuff with pen and paper and Excel sheets to be able to figure out. They have the e-commerce side already figured out, but they have their CRM. They already use Salesforce as their CRM. What they're missing basically is that the ability to assign certain drivers and certain trucks and trailers to be able to deliver the vehicle to the client. So I'm actually in the process of building this out for them at the moment. I can't talk too much about the success. We finished that discovery phase, and now we're about 1/3 of the way through the implementation phase. And it's ongoing workshops, conversations as we're building it out, as we repeat the process, have a bit of a design, a bit of a implementation, make sure we validate everything looks good, and build it out from there. And I can tell you they're quite excited. They can see already that there's a certain value that's being brought to them and how much better this will be once we finish with it. In the second example, it was a project that I worked on before pre-COVID, and it was an ability, it was a company that basically allowed you to order trailers, and you would be able to pack your stuff into the trailer and move from one location to another. So it was mostly about implementing Salesforce entirely from scratch. We had the sales side, we had the service side, and we had this kind of delivery mechanism as well. And unfortunately, even though we almost got to the end of the project, COVID hit and we were not able to finish it. The project was put on hold. So again, going in the right direction. They were very excited about it as well. I hope they have continued it since then, but we lost touch as projects tended to move on. And those are the two basically that I can think of. Unfortunately, they don't quite respond to your question about pushing that needle forward, but at least the excitement was there. They already saw the value as we were building it. So it's just a matter of time before we get there.
Got it. Yeah. And to that, maybe you can estimate, I'm just curious of an estimation of how long you start seeing an ROI, a return on investment from integrating with Salesforce and working with you.
So it depends. About 3 to 6 months is a short answer. Again, it depends on how many portions of Salesforce you bought, because Salesforce comes in these clouds: Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Field Service, CPQ, and so on. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, usually per cloud, you see a return within 3 to 6 months.
That's fast, I would say. And like you mentioned with your current customer, you're only a quarter on the way and they're already seeing good results. So I guess that's powerful.
It's a very efficient way of being able to manage their field service, basically. The technicians, their drivers moving around, knowing how to get from A to B to C, delivering all these different vehicles in a particular day. It requires some advanced algorithms and routing, and assigning the right driver and the right truck and trailer to be able to move these vehicles from around, it requires a lot of, I wouldn't say AI necessarily, but at least some complicated algorithms to determine the most optimal routes.
Got it. So does that mean that you have to consider integrating with other third-party tools? I have a hunch Salesforce does a lot of that, so you can plug in a lot of third-party things to, for things that are needed in whatever project. But in your case, do you find yourself using that a lot, or it's mostly sticking to the Salesforce ecosystem and tools they provide?
So again, it depends on the size. I've seen some where it's just Salesforce by itself in the cloud doing its thing. And there are plugins you can add on that make it quite extensible. I mean, I couldn't imagine, I can't even count how many plugins there are for Salesforce, because it's either offered by Salesforce themselves or other integration partners. So for a majority of what you need to do, Salesforce itself will work quite well, or with these plugins. The minute you want to start integrating with completely different systems, like an ERP, for example, that's when you would require some kind of middleware software to be able to integrate these two systems or three systems or whatever systems you have. Does that answer your question?
It does. No, that's a great answer. I just want to turn the page on the technicality of things and kind of something more that's more dear to me, I guess.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about design, and I'll tell you I don't have a lot of experience with Salesforce. Maybe I've been dipping my toes in some of their tools. I don't know. I think twice throughout my whole career, and what I can say is their design and experience is quite complex. I mean, the experience is complex and not that easy to use, what I found. And also the design, it's kind of a bit dated, what I've seen in their tooling. Now, I know that doesn't matter to many business founders, because essentially that's not what their end customers will see. It's mostly what their internal, like their employees will see. It's something they mostly use, maybe I'm assuming, for internal operations. But what's your take on that? And I'm sure you've seen a lot. So.
So yeah, just to clarify, you're absolutely right. Salesforce is designed to be a in-home or in-office tool. It's not meant to be a customer-facing type of thing, tool. That being said, as you know, and as I know how much we love UX, how important it is, and how dramatic an impact it can have, how a proper UX can really make the difference between a success and a failure. Salesforce does offer a UI that they call Lightning UI. And it's not bad, but there is a lot of variations. And just like building a website or a web application, you have a lot of choices. You are limited on what you can and can't do. It's not a custom application that you can build from scratch to design in any way you want. But there are components to it, dragging and dropping. There are different layout patterns, 2 columns, 1 column, 1/3, 2/3 type of columns. And these choices do make a difference. Page load times make a difference. Every second can count, especially when you have hundreds of, let's say, salespeople working on this every single day. Color choices, contrast, all these different UX principles, you definitely want to go through, or not enough agencies actually go through a process to make sure that not only does Salesforce do what they want to do functionally, but it's also very high usability. And this is something I do offer, actually. I do offer this heuristic evaluation, or UX evaluation, of Salesforce instances, where people are currently using Salesforce, but they're, for some reason, seeing a lot of friction using it. There's a lot of different shortcuts you can do through automation, custom in Salesforce, that will just help that process along and avoid, if you can skip 5 clicks and replace it with 1 click, that can add up over time. So UX is an important part, and probably overlooked too many times, or most of the time.
Yeah, no, actually, and maybe I'm not saying something new to you, but I have a hunch that's likely a unique side of your offering. So in addition to building a solution that it's stealth level from a technical standpoint, you also see beyond the the logical side of things and operations that a business needs. You see all these other things like how things look, how things work, how can we save users friction with using these tools being implemented. So that's pretty. I don't know. Am I wrong saying that, or am I right?
No, you're on the right track. The idea is that part of the benefit of coming in as an independent is I have fresh eyes. So I can take a look at your business, see how things are going, maybe offer advice and tweaks, what works, what might not work, what could be improved. And I have past experience and knowing best practices of how to implement Salesforce to be able to find that happy medium between all of those. So it is an important part. And again, some people, too many, I think, overlook that UX side of things and that the finesse part of it, that really pixel perfect type of situation.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. And I agree. I think, and likely many consultants in your sphere are probably doing just the technical side of things, that they don't have this bonus offering where they can really give that extra value. So okay, so Alex, a question I had in mind was around a hot topic or a recent project where you had to do this bigger thing. I don't know exactly what that could be, but something that's a hot topic for you and something you've done recently that you could maybe walk through the process of it and challenges and any tips or giveaways for people in the similar situation. What comes to mind?
So we talked a lot about moving from an old system to Salesforce, and a big part of that process is data migration. So you might have accounts and contacts, sales opportunities, quotes, products, anything you might have from a legacy system that you want to bring over to Salesforce. And a lot of agencies kind of shy away from this task because it's not easy. It can be quite complicated. You need to have certain database mindset, let's say. So luckily, this is something because I have a developer background and a database background, I started using some tools back in 1992. That kind of dates how old I am. But the idea is I've built a skill set in addition to everything else we've spoken about that helps companies do data migrations a bit more easily. It is basically, I am not afraid to do data transfers of up to 5 million records. I've done one for a huge company, a nonprofit, where they had so much data to move from one to the system to the next, and they had to transform their data. So there are certain tools out there that are very fancy, but they're designed to do on a repetitive process. If you have two systems together, you would have a middleware software that connects these two, and then it keeps them synchronized over time. But a data migration is usually a one-time thing. You move the data from the old system to Salesforce once, and that's over. So there isn't a lot of investment usually spent on it, but it is an important part because you want to make sure your data is accurate from the old to the new. So I'm actually building out a webinar now. It's going to be live in a couple of weeks, where I'm helping Salesforce consultants and Salesforce administrators use the proper tools, which is not Excel or Google Sheets, to be able to load this legacy data into Salesforce.
Got it. So this process or technique is called essentially data migration. I take,
it's how to load, how to migrate data into Salesforce using Microsoft Access, because Access is a database. It was designed to be a database. It has all kinds of really cool features that are simple to use. It's not some fancy, complicated, expensive type of middleware software. And within a few weeks, someone can learn how to use it. And it's a lot more efficient than using VLOOKUPs and Excel.
From what I hear, it sounds to me that this is something that larger companies or more mature companies would use, because those kind of companies would have something like Microsoft, what's it called? Access?
Access.
Yeah. I don't imagine a startup using it. That's all I'm saying. Startup would start with. Yeah.
Actually, no, for sure. Access is free, actually. It comes with Office 365. So it doesn't matter the size. You can be a one-man shop and still benefit from it. But this is more tailored toward the Salesforce consultant. It's the agency or the consultant helping a customer migrate from their old system to the new system and moving that data along. It's not really designed to be used by the end client itself unless they have certain people in-house that have that kind of knowledge and expertise.
I see. On that, and I think I've asked a similar question earlier, but if they do have a certain level of expertise in-house and the decision maker is bringing on this project, how do you manage the collaboration with this other person who is in-house, might have some ego issues or whatever, but maybe that situation never happened, but if you would, how would you overcome that, knowing that you are brought in from the outside by the founders of the company, and these people might feel shadowed, or given that they have a similar experience, maybe they're not at your level of expertise, but still you might have to work with them. So that's more of a people question, like collaboration level question, people skills.
Yeah, actually, I'm going through that scenario right now with that fintech, that transportation company that's delivering vehicles to clients. They have their own Salesforce resources in-house. So they have configurators or administrators, and they have developers writing code. What they don't have is an architect. They don't have someone who can come in and show them how it's supposed to be done and give them guidance. So it's more of an advisor guidance type strategy or position that I'm in, where we have these workshops on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And I tell them, okay, in order to be able to do this, here's what you want to do, here's what you want to consider, and here's what you want to stay away from. And then they go back, do the actual work, come back, demo, and we say, yeah, that's great, or refine and keep moving forward. So it's working with teams is part of what I need to do. It comes with the territory. And it's just about making sure that we all are aligned on what our goal is, what our rules are, that RACI matrix, to determine responsibility, and then go from there.
Tough question. So here's a tough question. At least I see it tough. Might not be a tough question. But have you ever been in a situation where you were asked or felt like people were trying to cut corners on the process, influence your proposed process too, or best practices, in both in terms of code side of things, architecture, and UX. For a reason like, hey, we need to ship things faster, we need to increase velocity, we don't have time to do XYZ that from the list of things you're proposing, and how has that affected the final outcome of the project or product?
There's always a balance. Usually the three factors in any project is scope, timeline, and budget. And I tend to give control to at least one of those to the client, or only one of those, I should say. And then I help and I work with them to determine the other two. So the idea is if budget is the most pressing concern, then we might have to adjust the timeline and the scope. If the scope is the issue, that is the most constrained, then we play with the other two factors. Cutting corners is an interesting perception, because as long as you are delivering value and as long as you are focusing on MVP, usually there aren't too many corners to cut. You might want to cut a bit of fat off that MVP to make sure you really are working on the minimum viable product. And there might be a tendency to say, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. But the problem is I've seen it's called scope creep, where you start with something very small and then you're never actually delivering something. You're always working and finding ways to improve it. And the expression goes, done is better than perfect. So get it out, get that MVP, that crawl phase out of the door, get people working on it, because the minute the team is using Salesforce, they themselves are going to realize a whole bunch of other ideas will be generated in their head and saying, oh, why don't we do this and why don't we do that, which is completely normal, perfectly natural, but give them that chance. So that's why going piece by piece, bite by bite, or bit by bit, like a Lego block, is important. Because, and even to expand on that, once we have delivered the first project, having some kind of governance is important as well. Having a team that decides, that collects the feedback from the rest of the company, and then decide what is the priority of this feedback. It's a great feedback. Is it important that we do it now? Is it important we do it later? Prioritize, determine a release schedule. all this is extremely important, again, for success of a project. So cutting corners can be done, but you want to make sure you're only trimming the fat, not the part that you really need to work in order for the project to work.
Got it. No, that's an absolutely great answer. And I've been in similar situations, and you're right. Those three pillars are definitely the ones you're going to play with. And I think one of the most important factor I found to make a project work when such requests arise are strong communication with the decision maker or whoever has final say on the product, because you have to be honest and essentially show them, or not show them, but essentially make it clear to them what the impact is on ABC options. And that's another thing. Like, okay, Mr. Customer, you want to cut some corners here. Maybe a budget is an issue, timeline is an issue, pressure from stakeholders or investors is an issue. Let me show you three options, and outside of the original options you probably suggested when the project started, like three options in this particular situation on what we could do. And also here's the level of risk you're taking. I'm just saying from my experience, that's what I would do. But all your answers were great, and I agree with everything you mentioned. And not ideal, but it happens. So
it does.
What are maybe so far in your profession you have observed other consultants or agencies practicing or malpracticing this subject of software architecture? Can you give some examples, and what are some of those bad recommendations that maybe you've heard or even read about? They're like, oh, this company, oh my God, I hope no one works with them, or this guy, or not that no one works with them. Sorry, I'm being too steep there, but more like, hey, they're on the wrong path here. Like, I know how to do this so much better. So if you have an example of that would be great. If not, it's fine as well.
There was a situation actually where I was called in to help. I was working with an agency at the time, and they had a consultant on site and talking to the client. It was a nonprofit, and this consultant was having a really tough time working with them. He found that he was not able to manage them. He felt the client was completely out of control, being totally unreasonable. So the agency asked me to jump in and help out. And I didn't notice the customer being difficult. I didn't feel that they were being challenging. And I can't quite explain why, but my intuition basically says that I just had a better way of communicating with them, of building that trust. I think the first few weeks of building communication, of talking to the client and establishing a rapport is extremely important. That will really set the foundation for all communication going forward. As we mentioned earlier, being a trusted advisor, being seen as someone I know he knows what he's talking about, or he knows what I'm talking about, is an important part. And really believing that or not necessarily just believing, but really understanding and realizing that, empathizing and realizing that I'm here to make your business successful. This is my outcome is when you guys are happy, I'm happy. And I've seen success so many times, and that's the biggest pleasure, and the reason why I do what I do is seeing the success, seeing the outcomes, and seeing the pleasure that people get from realizing, better ways of working and easier ways of working. So, yeah, communication and that rapport building, trust.
Do you have any advice to give to clients or tech founders in situations where they just don't know what to do next? Like they're stuck. They're aware of the problems they have, but they're stuck in terms of vision, or stuck in terms of choosing the right solution. Any maybe high level advice? It doesn't have to get technical.
Are we saying that they don't quite know what the problem is, or they know the problem, they don't know the solution?
Maybe they know the problem at a high level, but maybe they don't know all the details of the problem and the ramifications of other problems that exists under it, or and also they're just stuck. They don't know how to make the next step. It could be that maybe they have to pivot their offering or business, or maybe it's a case of just working with you and figuring it out. But I don't know. If you have any high-level suggestions, it could even be things like, hey, take a vacation. That's what I recommend all my clients. Take a 1-week vacation and come back fresh. I don't know. Anything you could recommend for early stage, especially early stage entrepreneurs, maybe Series A or so, who are, it's their first time business, or they're not so experienced.
So the underlying question, I think, is because it's a bit broad. The answer, it's a broad question, a broad answer. I think strategy consulting would be important, or a business coach of some kind. If you're really not quite sure where you want to go, and there's a lot of choices available to you, you need to have someone who has a very high level view. I'm not quite there, in the sense that I'm more in that CRM space. So once the problem has been identified, that the CRM or the sales tools or the field service or the pricing tools don't work, that's when usually I'm called in, or I can be of service. But if you're looking for something of more of a company level, high level, broad scope kind of thing, then a strategy consultant would be your best choice, or some kind of mentor.
That's a good point as well. I agree. Okay, so trying to conclude here, I have probably two more questions.
Sure.
How do you stay on top of your game, and what kind of resources or books, or where do you go to learn new things, or courses, or how do you essentially stay on top of your game? You're constantly learning in this industry, so I'm just curious of your methods.
Yeah, that's the great part about technology, is that it's never stationary. It's always moving, always changing. With Salesforce, they offer some great resources. There's Trailhead, which allows you to do some self-learning. They've got courses they offer as well. Used to be in person, now it's more virtual. There are certifications you can take as well to kind of prove your worth if you don't have that reputation already. There are certain LinkedIn channels and certain forums that you can join that are very specific to Salesforce. And it's such an ecosystem, like we said, that you have to kind of specialize in a couple of these things. It's very difficult to be a master of everything, because there's too much to master now. So usually you pick a couple of them, or have a thin but broad view of what Salesforce is, and then you read and follow up on the parts that are important to you. Salesforce also has releases 3 times a year, that they have these kinds of webinars to be able to introduce the technology in advance to partners, so that we get a bird's eye view of what's happening before it's released to the actual customer, so we can provide guidance to the customer. In addition to that, outside of the Salesforce world, reading books for me is important. Just researching tech in general, what's happening in the whole space, not just at the Salesforce level or the CRM level, but everything around it. Learning about AI, for example, which is more and more, it's infiltrating everything more and more, and how those tools can be used is important. And then just general reading, just reading about whatever interests you about the topic, or spin-offs, that helps as well.
Got it. Yeah, participating in all those online conversations and providing unsolicited help. I guess that helps as well,
Yeah, for sure.
Have you, that was actually my last question, but something else came to mind.
Sure.
Have you ever identified anything that doesn't work well, or where Salesforce is not necessarily the best approach, or something? We already talked about the UX side of things. In some areas they lack that, but I'll put that on the side. It could be more on the technical side of things. Maybe there's something you've identified where they're lacking, and it's a tough question, because I know Salesforce is a ginormous company. They have an army of developers, designers, and all product level roles. So it might be a tough question, but at the same time, maybe you have come across something, so that you can share.
So I think like most products, it's fantastic. It's really, really great. It's not perfect. There are certain pitfalls you want to avoid, or there's certain features and feature sets it does, but maybe doesn't do perfectly yet. But like I said earlier, because they're constantly evolving the system, things do get better over time. So an important part is just knowing where those cracks are and avoiding them, or at least making sure they're called out so that you know what to avoid or when Salesforce isn't the right choice. It's not like because I know Salesforce, it has to be used for every single situation. There are times when it's not appropriate. That expression that I love is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I have a pretty big hammer, but I'm also aware enough to know that not everything is a nail. So Salesforce isn't the catch-all, best-all solution for everyone or for every company. It is a fantastic tool for CRM. It is, like I said, number one by far compared to anything else from any other CRM. But it's important to know it's not perfect. It's close to perfect, though.
No, yeah, I'm not going to argue that. So, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on my first podcast, like guest podcast. Thank you for being part of this. I hope it was fun for you as well. Where can people find you?
Right, so Dryad Consulting, DRYAD Consulting, one word, dryadconsulting.com. That's my homepage. I'm still haven't got a podcast yet, but I hope to do it one day. And the webinar, like I said, the data migration for any Salesforce consultants, you'll find the links at the bottom of Dryad Consulting to my webinar coming up to be able to help you and guide you to doing data migrations into Salesforce.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. Have yourself a lovely evening. I know it's late for both of us, so thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Honor was mine.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe and listen to more of these. And if you're enjoying the show so far, I would be super, super grateful if you could leave me a 5-star review or comment. And of course, share it with all your friends and family and everyone you meet on the street. That's it for now. I'm Adrian Sule, and I hope you can join me again on the next episode of the FutureMoose Podcast. Shameless plug, shameless plug, shameless plug. It's a shameless plug. Would you like your website, product, or service to be designed and optimized for growth by a team of stellar design experts so you can meet both your customer needs and your business goals? Well, head over to FutureMoose.com. That's FutureMoose, moose as in the animal moose. A very creative name. Thank you very much. So FutureMoose.com, and check how our design agency is helping tech founders increase conversion rates, average order size, increase retention and engagement, and reduce churn rates that can double or even triple your monthly or annual recurring revenue. Our work is guaranteed, and you can expect an average return on investment of over 80% by partnering up with us.